the poster boy of South African athletics, the flag bearer for them. 43-48 when he won in Beijing last year. No South African has won this title for 96 years. A century of history beckons for Van Niekerk. Can you imagine the adrenaline?
Set.
Mandela, Mandela, Mandela says fight for freedom. Mandela says freedom now. Mandela says freedom now. Slave in a land of Africa. In a land of Africa.
Sport has the power to change the world.
What makes the sporting thread of the much larger South African story so poignant and so powerful and so important is the fact that it was a mirror of what the society was. It was racially segregated.
What I love most about running is just getting away from my daily circumstances. We didn't have it easy, and I think doing athletics just made me forget about everything and anything. I can just cut off everything around me that is not good for myself, and not having to think about anything for an hour and a half or so.
When I started running, I think the first thing that I fell in love with was the fact that I could own it. I loved when I was out in nature, I could explore. It was a space that I really enjoyed being in. I love the fact that when I go out there, you can let your mind go, and just for a period of time, you're sort of just in, in another world.
Sports people in South Africa who were black, the ceiling was very, very low. If one was black, that black person can never represent South Africa in international sport.
My first year at high school was when the battle in South Africa was at its worst. I remember going to my first day at school, and I remember we all having to duck and dive and lie flat on the ground because there was rubber bullets going everywhere and tear gas going everywhere. It was a big battle about wanting what our white brothers and sisters have.
So during apartheid, as now, the vast majority of people in South Africa are the indigenous people of the country, black South Africans. How did a small minority take a grip on a country and hold that grip for as long as they did, in as powerful a way as they did? On one level, the answer is really quite simple. That power was taken at gunpoint.
What is important for us to note is that whites were the only ones who were allowed to represent South Africa internationally. So because of this, that is when black South Africans realized the only way to overcome this is to make sure that the black South Africans who are good at sport were recognized overseas. And how can that be done? Is that we needed to exclude the white South African organizations from international sport.
The first moment that I realized that I could run was when I was 13 years old, and it was 21 kilometers stretching from one town, Napier, to another town, Bredasdorp. And I can just remember when I entered the town, nobody caught me, nobody passed me, and I went on to win my first half marathon at the age of 13 years old. And from the next year, I started getting coaching, moved to a bigger school.
Our coaches was our teachers, so we didn't have specific coaches that we trained with. I had a teacher there, Mr. Cliffy Boyson, and he took me under his wing, and he started coaching me, and he also then became sort of the father figure in my life. He supported me in many, many ways, and under his reins, I had become a very good athlete, and that's where everything started for me. That's where I found that I can actually make something of this.
The organizations that push for the sports boycott outside of South Africa and the individuals who led that fight, like Sam Ramsamy, played an incredibly important role, especially at a time when opposition within the country was being so brutally and successfully suppressed, was they kept all this on the agenda.
The IOC then realized that it is a fact that black people are being discriminated, not because they agreed, but because the lobby from the African IOC members and together with the lobby from the Soviet bloc of countries said, well, if South Africa is going to take part because it's going to be a white South African team, we will not take part. And then South Africa was excluded from participating in the Olympic Games in 1964 held in Tokyo. In 1976, when we had Olympic Games in Montreal, the New Zealand Rugby Union decided to tour South Africa. So the African countries said, well, we have to do something to prevent the New Zealand rugby team coming to South Africa. Nevertheless, the New Zealand rugby team came. So the African countries said, look, we can't take part in the Olympic Games. And as a result, all the African countries withdrew from the Olympic Games in 1976.
Black people were not just oppressed as black people, but they were oppressed as people who were by law forced to be poor and unable to develop advantage for themselves. So with that as a framework, sport played out in every single possible way within those confines. So it affected what facilities black people were able to access.
Well, we didn't have any facilities. There was no facilities to train on. The only grounds that we trained on was the grass that was on the school premises.
Obviously, because of the way the schools were structured, we had schools for white South Africans, for coloured South Africans, mixed race, for black South Africans. In high school level, I trained with my school. I had shoes that I trained with, but ultimately, when you line up for a race, I felt faster without shoes. So at least I had some training shoes that I could train with.
In my instance, I had a single mother, so she couldn't always afford to buy what I needed. So, yeah, so for most of my life, I ran bare feet until one of my teachers at school bought me a pair of spikes. And I remember the first time buying my own pair of tackies was, I was about 16, we had a invitational meeting at UWC that was a tartan track. And I remember being the best athlete at the night, and I won 500 Rand. And it was the biggest gift I actually ever gave myself. And that was buying myself a pair of tackies.
I didn't have the privilege to compete internationally for many years because of the system. Since I was 9 years old, I always wanted to go to the Olympics, but that was in the midst of apartheid. I missed out 84 Olympics, 88 Olympics. That was the time when I started shifting my goals. So when I started raising the bar, my times even improved further. And even though I couldn't compete against the athletes on the track, I competed against them with my times.
Because of apartheid, our records and our achievements were never acknowledged, because you had your whites on their own and you had the coloreds and black on their own. And the only way how we could measure ourselves with everyone else in South Africa was to watch on TV, because the white meetings was always broadcast on TV, and you could then see, but I would have beat this person, I would have run faster than that person. So that's the only way how we could measure our achievements.
There's Mr. Mandela, Mr. Nelson Mandela, a free man taking his first steps into a new South Africa.
I think if you were committed to the end of apartheid, its complete uprooting, then you had to support the sports boycott. Firstly, because it worked.
So in 1991, I became the interim president of the National Olympic Committee of South Africa. And then we took the first team, although it was largely white, but we took the non-racial team to the Olympic Games in Barcelona in 1992.
The integrated team from South Africa, returning to the Games after a 32-year absence because of its government policy of apartheid, the separation of races.
The opening ceremony in Barcelona was absolutely incredible. The setting of the Olympic Stadium on the top of Montjuïc was just such an exceptional venue. It was just such a special, special moment for me.
To all of us, Ilana Meyer represented South Africa in all its manifestations.
I went into the Olympic final and I had a plan. I had a plan B, I had a plan C. You know, I know myself, I knew my competitors. I knew Dorata Toulouse in the race. She can run the last lap under 60 seconds. Our spikes clipped a couple of times in the race. You know, I felt her presence all along. She was just behind me. Then going into the last lap, you know, she went past me. She won the race. Even though I didn't win gold that day, it felt and meant gold to me. But on the day, really celebrated an opportunity that I was waiting for a very, very long time.
I did very well from the age of 14 until 18. I had made the provincial as well as the SASA and SAP team every single year. They were all those big names that I've looked up to and admired, but I never had the dream of becoming them. I think maybe because knowing that living in the apartheid era, you won't ever have the opportunity. So when I was 17, I fell pregnant with Wade. He was born 29 weeks premature. He also needed a blood transfusion in the first 24 hours of his life. And it was tough, and it took a lot of praying that night because there's so many things going through your head, not knowing if your child is going to be okay, is he going to be alive. I mean, mentally myself, I wasn't prepared to help me through that period because it was very, very tough to raise this premature baby. But I struggled quite a bit to do mom work and running. So I chose to totally leave the running, and that's how everything changed from my running career to just being a mom to Wade. And now I've just got to look forward and move forward and just try and better my life and my kids' life.
In 1992, when South Africa was admitted for the first time after its long isolation into the Olympic movement, it represented to me, it is the beginning, starting point for reconstruction. And since 1992, South Africa has taken part in every Olympic game, both summer and winter.
Stadium getting ready. South African Wade van Niekerk. He's a rising star. Came onto the scene last year, upsetting Ronnie James and LaShawn Merritt to win the World Championships.
We have the 4th, the 6th, and the 8th fastest man ever in the same race, taking the track for this men's 400-meter final.
Well, the road to the Olympics was very tough for Wade because he was just so frustrated with his back and his hamstring forever being sore. Because he would come home some nights and he would say, I think I don't want to do athletics anymore. And tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock, I'll hear the shower open and he'll be gone back to the gym.
And thinking back home of his mother, Odessa, who was a world-class athlete herself, but denied the chance to compete internationally because of the apartheid rules in South Africa.
I am certain it was Odessa who's inspired Wade to where he is now. Without the help of Odessa, that Wade could have been that good, because I believe that the inspiration, the motivation, everything has certainly come from Odessa.
Everyone started sending messages about, what do you think about Wade running in lane 8 and it's never happened and he'll never be able to win.
History is against him, and that's because no man has ever won a global championship at 400 out of lane 8. Let's take a look at Wade van Niekerk's start. He's outside in lane 8. As I have said, nobody has ever won the Olympics or the World Championships out of lane 8. He's out there blind.
Set.
Mandela, Mandela. Mandela says fight for. Mandela says freedom now. Mandela says freedom now. All we say away, we say. In a land of Africa. Holy Tasha. Holy Tasha Mandela. Freedom is in your hand. Freedom. In a land of Africa. In a land of Africa. Holy Tasha. Holy Tasha Mandela. Freedom is in your hand.
What an achievement. Olympic record, world record, a record that was held by Michael Johnson for so many years, and the praise that he got from everybody, including Usain Bolt and Michael Johnson.
Guess what, Michael Johnson? The world record has been destroyed. Wayne Van Niekerk puts together the performance of his life.
It was a moment that I am glad that I was there to experience. It's a moment that I know I will cherish for the rest of my life.
It's really a special feeling, and at the same time I know I've got a responsibility now to try and put out a good role model or idol out there for those who's looking out for me. At the same time, with my mother itself, it's really something special knowing that I could carry on her legacy, and I'm really honored to carry not just her name but my whole family's name.
Wade van Niekerk, probably the most inspirational athlete South Africa has ever produced. I think to be able to go to the Olympic Games, to not only win gold, but to break the world record. He's humble, he's inspirational, and certainly somebody I look up to and know that will inspire a whole new generation.
I said, Wade, I've chosen to present the medals for the 400 meters race, and I'm going to present you with a gold medal. Winning the gold medal at the Olympic Games in Rio, it represented unbounding possibilities for South Africa.
I'm part of the new generation where we're trying to build a new legacy for the country. And at the same time, we're taking the past with us. At this moment, it's not what's important to me right now. What's important to me right now is trying to build a new image and a new legacy for the country.
Sport is a leveler. Sport can bring everybody together. The Olympics is the most important single word, if I might say, in bringing sport together in all its manifestations. Too many to mention. It brings in peace, it brings in integration, it brings in understanding, and this is what the intention of the IOC is.
My name is Ilana Meyer. For many years I was a professional athlete. Nowadays I'm one of the ambassadors and part of the organizing team of the Cape Town Marathon.
My name is Odessa Swartz. I'm the mother of 3 kids, one being Wade van Niekerk.
It's 27 years later. There's still structures that remains being built up in the years of apartheid, but I think there's many things that have been broken down, and all athletes have got the freedom of choice to choose how to pursue their own life. Anyone can decide where they want to go, how far they want to go, how high they want to jump.
I was meant to go through everything. I was meant to go through hardship. I believe that it wasn't meant for me. I was never meant to be great, but I was meant to be the mother of someone great.
I'm a very strong believer in, what Nelson Mandela said back in, in the 90s. Sport certainly has got the power to change the world.